The talks collapsed and the world sank into chaos, missiles crossing skies, and World War III is almost certain. Now it's a mess. The meeting between the United States and Russia turned into a total disaster. Instead of bringing peace, it destroyed what little trust remained and threw the future straight into a third world war. The dialogue is over. It's done. Any accusation now carries the weight of a global declaration of war. On the battlefield, the reaction was instant. Ukraine, with full NATO support, expanded devastating attacks on Russian factories and depots, while Moscow struck back, targeting power grids and entire cities. Within hours, the game changed. Missiles, blackouts, and retaliation turned the map into an open hunting zone. Putin unleashed hell, tanks advance and generals run. No one controls what's about to explode anymore. NATO, as I said, went in hard. Nuclear movements began in the Netherlands, Russian aircraft were intercepted in the north, others belonging to Putin were shot down, and Ukrainian soldiers trained inside Western Alliance bases. Putin declared all of this was the red line he needed for his final strike. Now everything is rushed. Generals move, diplomats scramble for a ceasefire, and governments review stockpiles and defense contracts. But if dialogue remains stalled while missiles keep falling, who controls the escalation? No one knows where this line ends. The powers broke the balance and the world fell into darkness, where any spark turns into apocalypse. With summits collapsing, attacks on infrastructure, and nuclear maneuvers unfolding, do you believe the pains of the Third War can now be felt? From now on, could we witness a direct war between nuclear powers? Do you feel fear of this scenario? Just a reminder, this report is based on news from Sky News, The New York Times, BBC, The Guardian, Al Jazeera, Sputnik, RT News, and Telegram. But before we get into the video, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Your subscription means a lot and helps you stay updated on every story about the raging nations. And don't forget to give this video a thumbs up to help this project grow even more. The summit between the United States and Russia ended with no deal, revealing that the deadlock is deeper than anyone thought. Delegations left the table early and confirmed there's no consensus on sanctions, territories, or the future of European security. Putin refused any troop withdrawal or freezing of occupied areas. Trump, on the other hand, demanded guarantees of Ukraine's neutrality. The meeting that was supposed to rekindle dialogue ended in accusations and public exposure of mutual distrust. In Washington and Brussels, analysts called the outcome the worst possible. No joint statement, total Russian silence, and the clear message, there's no common ground left. What was once a deadlock turned into a diplomatic rupture, and it could prolong the war, escalate it into a global conflict, or even a nuclear one if NATO gets more involved. Right after the fiasco, cracks appeared within NATO itself. Some allies began to doubt whether the United States truly wants a ceasefire. Moscow took advantage of the mood to reinforce its narrative that the West never wanted peace, only submission. Who's lying in this story? Diplomats say the Kremlin is already preparing new territorial demands and stitching a diplomatic counteroffensive with China and Iran. The warning is clear. If this rapprochement gains traction, the collapse of negotiations could open doors to even more dangerous fronts on the global board. The US and Russia buried diplomacy and revived war. The whole planet is walking into total collapse. After the failed meeting, the American team admitted there's no plan for a new one. Trump made it clear he'll only return to the table if Putin agrees to discuss military limits and withdraw some troops from eastern Ukraine. And Putin has already made it clear that a nuclear missile will fall before that happens. Exactly. The Kremlin reacted coldly, directly, and with a completely threatening tone. It said it won't negotiate under threats and accused Washington of using diplomacy as a disguise to impose sanctions. In Moscow, the meeting was seen as a humiliation, and the resistance narrative once again dominated every state media speech. In Kyiv, the news hit as confirmation of what many already suspected: Moscow won't give up anything. Zelensky declared that any agreement starts with the return of occupied territories. And with that stance, the chance of international mediation collapses even further. Now, the consequences begin to spread. New sanctions are coming, along with more military movements and a real bidding war for regional alliances. Europe watches in fear as nuclear rhetoric returns, while diplomats warn the dialogue between Washington and Moscow is dead. The cancellation of the Budapest summit became a symbol of the point of no return between the powers. Without a direct channel, the risk of a military accident grows by the day. And the question haunting the world is, what comes after this silence that could fulfill apocalyptic prophecies? Putin vowed nuclear fire if challenged, and no one doubts the first missile already has its target. On the battlefield, Ukraine responded to the diplomatic collapse with renewed strength and energy. Zelensky used powerful British Storm Shadow missiles, hitting Putin's factories, depots, and logistics centers. Kyiv confirmed the offensive and said it will maintain the pace until Moscow understands the price of war. A chemical facility in Kursk exploded in sequence after the attack, leaving smoke columns visible for kilometers. Russian authorities tried to downplay the damage, but the images spoke for themselves. Kyiv celebrated the strike, calling it an exemplary tactical success. Just hours later, satellites recorded the near-total destruction of one of Putin's oil depots in Crimea. 5 tanks were hit, paralyzing part of Russia's naval supply in the Black Sea. A precise strike on one of the war's most strategic routes. Moscow hit back hard. It bombed Ukrainian cities and targeted the power grid, leaving entire regions without electricity. Winter is coming, and the energy collapse has become a real threat not only in Ukraine but across Europe. The Kremlin said proportional retaliation will come with the start of nuclear bombings. Experts say this exchange of attacks marks a new phase. Both sides are testing the infamous red line. Now suicide drones, hypersonic weapons, and an unprecedented escalation come into play. How far will they go before the world loses control? Cities burn and winter comes. The next blast could wipe borders and change the planet forever. Ukrainian forces advanced on Russian positions in Donetsk but met brutal resistance. T-90 tanks and heavy artillery fired non-stop, scattering fragments for kilometers. Casualties are rising on both sides, and the front looks more and more like a battlefield of total exhaustion. In Kyiv, sirens blared again through the night. Air defenses intercepted dozens of Iranian Shahed 136 drones, but the pace of attacks hasn't stopped. Analysts say Moscow wants to overwhelm Ukraine's air defense system, forcing the country to spend everything it has. Kharkiv and Zaporizhia also became targets. Iskander missiles destroyed industrial buildings, and Ukrainian forces responded with GPS-guided artillery. The number of victims rises every day, and every family lives ready to flee in the middle of the night. Is this still war or punishment? Ukraine's military command reported over 100 battles in just 24 hours. Troops trained by Western instructors show mastery of suicide drones and long-range precision missiles. Ukraine has become a live laboratory of modern warfare. With increasingly long and powerful attacks, fears grow that one mistake could hit a neighboring country. If that happens, Europe could be dragged straight into the fire. And who guarantees NATO would just stand by watching the spark turn into a blaze? The front turned into a graveyard. Drones hunt humans, and one mistake could drag Europe into nuclear fire. NATO responded to the escalation with the nuclear drill Steadfast Noon in the Netherlands. Fighters, bombers, and tankers carried out operations for tactical warhead use. The move was called routine, but let's be honest, no one runs a nuclear drill just for protocol. Military sources confirmed that US B-52 bombers took part alongside Allied F-35 fighters. Officially, it was a readiness movement. Unofficially, it was a direct message to Moscow. Putin called it a provocation. What if he decides to respond in kind? An editorial from the Chicago Tribune stated that despite criticism, NATO has once again become the backbone of European security. According to the piece, the Russian invasion gave new momentum to the alliance and restored the prominence that had been dead since the Cold War ended. In Norway, F-35 fighters intercepted Russian aircraft that came too close to NATO airspace. The alert spread across Scandinavia, and the debate reopened. Is the northern flank too vulnerable? Every flight now sounds like a warning that the worst may be coming. In Brussels, pressure is mounting to create a permanent military command in Eastern Europe with troops from the United States, Poland, and Romania. Half of the European Union supports it, half fears provoking Moscow. But how long will fear dictate decisions while missiles keep falling? NATO rehearses warheads while Putin watches. One wrong move, and the European sky turns radioactive. Poland announced it had shot down Russian unmanned aircraft that crossed its airspace during attacks on Ukraine. Warsaw declared maximum alert and warned Moscow any new violation will be treated as direct aggression. Washington immediately backed the move, sending military advisors to the country. Putin responded with the veiled threat. He said he would take proportional measures and accused NATO of exploiting the incident politically. Moscow claims the aircraft were on automatic routes, but no one bought that version. The fear is clear. How far will this game of provocations go? 9 NATO countries expanded the training of a Ukrainian brigade in Poland. The focus now is on using Western long-range weapons, Javelin missiles, Bayraktar drones, and air surveillance radars. The war has already become a testing ground for military technology. Reports confirm that intelligence cooperation is at its peak. Satellite data is shared in real time, enabling surgical strikes. Moscow accuses the West of waging an indirect war. But is it really indirect when the finger that aims and fires is trained by NATO? The increase in joint operations, border incidents, and nuclear rhetoric made it clear this war has already gone beyond regional limits, and NATO's next move could decide the conflict's future or push the planet past the point of no return. Every provocation now is a countdown to the end, and the whole planet feels something irreversible has begun. With so much tension, European leaders rush to contain the damage. Emergency meetings in Brussels try to slow the escalation, but no one wants to look weak. Every new statement sounds like a challenge, and the continent balances on a diplomatic knife's edge. Diplomats confirm that Ukraine and its allies are preparing a new peace plan. The proposal includes limited territorial concessions and security guarantees under international supervision. It's the boldest attempt since the start of the war. But does anyone still believe in peace? Inspired by Gaza's ceasefire model, the project would create a permanent council including the European Union, the UN, and the United States. It would manage demilitarized zones and monitor arms use. But the challenge is getting Putin to accept any kind of external oversight. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte traveled to Washington to discuss the plan with Trump and the Pentagon. Sources say the United States is cautious. A poorly structured ceasefire could give Russia time to rearm and come back stronger. Does anyone trust this game? While diplomats try to stitch agreements, intelligence reports show Russian movements in Belarus and the Black Sea. If these maneuvers are real, they could bury the truce for good. Time is running, and the war's clock always seems ahead, never behind. Diplomats fail. Armies advance and time runs. The war clock is seconds away from midnight. In Eastern Europe, countries like Poland and the Baltic states already see the conflict as inevitable. They're strengthening alliances, buying Leopard tanks and Patriot missiles, and expanding their armies. Everyone is preparing for the worst-case scenario: new Russian attacks on essential infrastructure. Trump, under pressure both inside and outside Congress, demands quick results. He conditions military aid to Ukraine on anti-corruption measures and greater spending transparency. In Kyiv, the mood is tense. Any delay in aid could cost dearly in the next offensives. Putin isn't backing down an inch. He said the annexed territories are now part of the Russian Federation and not up for discussion. The refusal to talk withdrawal leaves Russia even more isolated, but it also shows the Kremlin prefers confrontation to concession. With diplomacy stalled, armies keep preparing. European drills simulate cyber attacks and missile defense. The mood is one of full readiness, and if the next round of talks fails, the continent could shift into full war mode. It feels like dialogue has lost to military strategy. If the peace plan fails, Europe plunges into a new era of total militarization. Every army is arming to the teeth, and any mistake could trigger a global crisis impossible to contain. Europe arms itself to the teeth. One mistake now detonates a global crisis. No one can stop. Meanwhile, another battlefield emerges, the energy front. A Ukrainian attack hit a Russian gas plant that supplied Chevron and Shell refineries in Kazakhstan. The impact was immediate, raising alarms about the fragility of global energy networks. Experts warn that gas and oil prices could skyrocket during the European winter. Moscow accuses Kyiv of targeting civilian infrastructure and promises economic retaliation. But how separate are energy and war anymore? Or have they become the same weapon? The Czech government decided to donate a surveillance satellite to Ukraine to monitor oil and gas pipelines in real time. Kyiv increasingly depends on Western technology to survive. Modern warfare is fought with both missiles and data from space. The Kremlin responds by accusing the West of waging hybrid warfare, sabotage, cyber attacks, and propaganda. Putin declared that Russia will not be divided and revived the old doctrine of divide and conquer. But does he still control his own board? With record military spending, the Ukrainian parliament approved a historic defense budget for 2025. Billions are going to drones, missiles, and air defense. But the question remains, how far can this conflict go before the money or patience runs out? War became an economic weapon, gas and blood mix, and the energy collapse threatens the whole planet. Western powers see the war turning into a bottomless economic pit. Every attack destabilizes energy routes and crashes markets. While trying to contain inflation and financial chaos, leaders realize this isn't just a military war, it's a global struggle for economic power. European companies tremble under the threat of new cross-sanctions. Russia threatens to completely cut gas supplies to hostile nations, which could paralyze industries in Germany, France, and the Czech Republic. An industrial blackout in Europe is exactly what the Kremlin wants. Trump insists that the United States can't bankroll the conflict alone. He demands more investment and shared risk from NATO. The demand divides allies. Some want to expand support for Ukraine, others fear collapsing their own economies. How long can this collective patience last? In Moscow, Putin plays with time. He uses energy supply as a political weapon, cuts exports selectively, and strengthens ties with China and India. He's trying to turn the Western blockade into a game of global endurance, and seems to be doing better than expected. The result is a world split between energy, power, and survival. Europe tries to keep diplomacy alive, but Russia prepares to use even winter as a weapon. When the cold arrives, who will endure longer? Russian gas or Europe's faith in peace? Powers crumble under sanctions, energy turns to blackmail, and Europe kneels to avoid freezing to death. With diplomacy in ruins and weapons speaking louder, the cycle seems endless. Neither side wants to retreat and trust has vanished. The war is no longer about territory, it's about control of the future. Whoever rules tomorrow rules the world. Every sanction and every strike push the planet to the brink of a global rupture. The line between deterrence and provocation hangs by a thread. Nuclear weapons appear in simulations, speeches, and veiled threats. Peace has become an almost theoretical and dangerous concept to mention. Diplomacy tries to breathe, but the air of war suffocates everything. Summits fail, bombings continue, and the energy race accelerates. The conflict has entered an irreversible phase where every political mistake could ignite the fuse of a global catastrophe. Even with peace promises, the planet arms itself in silence. The coming months will decide everything. Either reason prevails or the world enters a new era of direct confrontation. And when the first missile crosses borders, it will be too late to talk about restraint. The world is armed, peace is dead, and the next blast could be the last sound we hear. With summits collapsing, infrastructure under attack, and nuclear maneuvers unfolding, do you believe the pains of a third world war are already being felt? From now on, could we witness a direct war between nuclear powers? Do you feel fear of this scenario? Thanks so much for sticking around until the end of the video. You're awesome, and I really appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any updates on the raging nations. And don't forget to give this video a thumbs up to help this project grow even more.